My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 28 years old, and for most of my life, the only thing I used to worry about at night was whether my upstairs neighbor would fall through the ceiling during one of his drunken arguments with his TV. But that was before I moved into the end unit at Ashwood Court and learned that a bedroom door unlocking by itself at 2:17 a.m. is a lot worse than any noise complaint. I work nights doing remote security diagnostics for a subcontractor that services state facilities, which is a fancy way of saying I sit in a black hoodie with a faded logo, dark jeans and steel-toe boots in front of 3 monitors while code crawls by and I pretend to be important. The hours are bad, but the pay is steady, and for someone who doesn't exactly crave company anymore, the graveyard shift is perfect. That's why I didn't mind when the only apartment I could afford was on the ground floor of an aging complex pressed up against a strip of undeveloped woods on the edge of town. The landlord, a bald guy named Ernie who talked too fast and smelled like burnt coffee, handed me the key and said, "Locks are all new, deadbolts solid, but you follow the rules in the binder, yeah." I thought he meant no smoking, no pets, that kind of thing. But when I flipped through the laminated pages later, there were a few that didn't make sense. After 10 p.m., do not leave the bedroom door open. After 2 a.m., do not unlock the bedroom door for any reason. Underneath, in small print, failure to follow building protocol voids liability and tenancy protections. I snorted, shoved the binder back in the kitchen drawer, and went back to setting up my little kingdom of second-hand furniture and cable tangles. The first week was uneventful. I got used to the rhythm of my schedule. Come home around midnight, shower, eat something that could barely be called food, skim a few diagnostic dashboards for a new encrypted client in our system, something labeled only Project Nocturne, with most of the documentation blacked out, then crash in my bedroom with the door closed, phone on the nightstand, AC humming like white noise. That's why I noticed the sound the first time it happened. It was small, precise, unmistakable. The soft metallic clack of my bedroom doorknob turning all the way, followed by the smooth chunk of the latch withdrawing from the frame. I snapped awake, heart already pounding, no idea what had pulled me out of sleep until the silence closed over the room. The clock on my phone glowed in the dark. 2:17. I lay there holding my breath, listening for footsteps, breathing anything, but there was only the low drone of the AC and the distant whoosh of cars on the main road. After a full minute of nothing, I sat up slowly. The room was dim, just a little amber light sneaking under the blinds from the parking lot. I could see the door clearly from the bed. The deadbolt was vertical in the locked position, but the door itself was standing open about 3 inches, a thin black line where the hallway should have been. I knew I'd closed it. I always closed it. Ground floor unit, one flimsy chain on the sliding glass door in the living room, neighbors I didn't know. Closing that bedroom door had become automatic, like breathing. I stared at that dark gap for so long my eyes watered. Finally, I swung my legs off the bed, boots touching the carpet, and walked over, every inch of me ready to feel cold air or a hand or nothing at all. When I put my fingers on the knob, it was warm, like it had just been held. I yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, shadows long and harmless, the bathroom door closed, the living room beyond dim and still. I checked every window, the main door, the tiny laundry closet. Everything was locked. Nothing was disturbed. I convinced myself I'd dreamed the sound, that maybe the latch didn't catch when I went to bed and some change in air pressure had nudged the door open. I shut it again, this time pushing until it clicked hard, slid the deadbolt over for good measure, and went back to bed feeling stupid and wired and very awake. The next night it happened again. I woke to that same clean metallic click, my body moving before my brain, sitting up with my heart in my throat. The phone screen said 2:17. Exactly. The door was open wider this time, 6 inches, enough that the hallway looked like a mouth. I didn't get up. I just stayed there, breathing shallowly, staring at the gap until my eyes adjusted and the shapes in the hall resolved into familiar outlines. No one there. No movement. Just the door, unlocked and open, like something had come in or gone out or just wanted me to know it could. I should have called Ernie that morning. I should have demanded he check the hinges, the frame, the lock. Instead, I did what tired men on weird shifts always do. I talked myself into the least terrifying explanation so I wouldn't have to rearrange my entire life. Third night, I wedged a dining chair under the knob before I went asleep, the stupid binder rules echoing in the back of my head. After 2 a.m., do not unlock the bedroom door for any reason. I laughed as I jammed the chair in place. There, I told the empty room. Now we all follow the rules. I fell asleep to a podcast, hoodie pulled over my head, blanket twisted around my legs. Sometime later, the bed shook. Not like an earthquake, more like someone had bumped into the frame from the hall. I surfaced from a dream like I'd been thrown out of it. The room was dark, the audio long since finished. For a second, I thought it was just a muscle spasm until I heard it, metal scraping softly against wood, a slow rising creak like pressure being applied where there shouldn't be pressure. The glow from my phone said 2:17. I turned my head toward the door and my mouth went dry. The chair I'd wedged under the knob was tilting back on 2 legs, the front edge shoved away from the door as the knob turned, steady, relentless. The deadbolt slid back with agonizing slowness, not snapping like a human hand would move it, but easing out, millimeter by millimeter, like whoever or whatever was on the other side was still figuring out how much force things took in here. The latch retracted. The door inched open. The chair settled back down without falling. I couldn't move, couldn't shout. All I could do was listen, not to footsteps or breathing because there was none of that, but to the sudden heavy silence that settled in the room once the door was cracked open exactly as far as it had been the night before, as if this thing respected its own margins. My phone buzzed so loud in the dark it made me flinch. An emergency alert banner filled the screen bright red. Statewide notice, it said. Unexplained door events reported. If any interior door in your residence opens by itself between 2:15 and 2:20 a.m., do not investigate. Do not exit your bedroom. Do not look into the hallway. At the bottom, smaller text. This message authorized by DHS/Project Nocturne. I stared at it, skin crawling, while cool air breathed through the gap in the doorway like the apartment itself was exhaling. Whatever was on the other side didn't care that I'd blocked it. It hadn't needed the chair to move. And now I knew 3 things for sure. This wasn't just my apartment, Project Nocturne was real, and somebody, somewhere, expected a lot more doors to start unlocking on their own at 2:17 a.m. exactly. The emergency alert sat on my phone screen like a glowing wound in the dark, searing itself into my brain while the door remained cracked open, just wide enough for the blackness of the hallway to drip into the bedroom like something alive. And as I stared at that sliver of void, I realized the rule in the binder wasn't a quirky landlord requirement. It was a warning, a survival regulation, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to close my eyes and pretend none of this was happening. But fear wouldn't let me, curiosity wouldn't let me, something deeper and older than both wouldn't let me, so I stayed sitting up in bed, my breath shallow as frost, my hoodie sticking to my back with cold sweat, my heart thundering like it was trying to warn the rest of me to run, but my legs wouldn't move, my voice wouldn't work, and my mind kept looping back to those 3 lines from the binder. After 10 p.m., do not leave the bedroom door open. After 2 a.m., do not unlock the bedroom door for any reason. Failure to follow building protocol voids liability and tenancy protections. Whoever wrote those rules knew something. Whoever wrote them had survived something. And now whatever was outside my room had slipped past every lock, every bolt, every barrier I thought would protect me. The silence in the apartment was no longer silence. It was a pressure, a density, the sense of being watched by something with no eyes, something that didn't breathe but still filled the air with its presence. I knew better than to get off the bed, but lying still wasn't enough to make the dread settle. I swallowed hard and forced myself to slowly, painfully, lean sideways and peer toward the gap in the doorway, and every inch I shifted felt like moving through water thick with needles. Nothing was visible except the hallway's darkness, until the darkness seemed to bend, subtly, like heat rising off asphalt, but colder, wrong, as if space itself were flexing in a way it shouldn't. No shape, no figure, just distortion. Then from the hallway, I heard something I will never forget. The unmistakable sound of breathing, except it wasn't inhalation or exhalation. It was like something was learning how to breathe, practicing, imitating the cadence of lungs without having lungs of its own. A hollow, papery rhythm like air sucked between sheets of damp fabric. I pressed my knuckles to my teeth to stop the sound that wanted to come out of me, because I knew, somehow I knew, the thing was listening for me. The emergency alert said not to look into the hallway. I had looked. It said not to investigate. I had. It said not to exit the bedroom. I wouldn't. Not now. Not until daylight. For the next 3 hours, that breathing came and went like a tide, approaching the doorway, withdrawing, returning again, each time closer, more synchronized, more accurate, until the final round of inhaling sounded eerily human enough that my stomach flipped with primal, animal terror. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under, not into sleep but into a numb haze, and I must have drifted in and out until a faint blue dawn seeped around the blinds. When I finally looked back at the doorway, the chair was upright. The door was shut tight, the deadbolt engaged. Someone or something had closed it. My hands shook so violently I had to sit on them. I didn't leave the bedroom until 9 a.m. when I pushed the door open. Every light in the apartment was on: kitchen, bathroom, hall, even the overhead lamp I never used. I hadn't turned any of them on. In the living room, the binder was sitting upright on the coffee table, open to the page with the rules. I hadn't taken it out of the drawer since the day I moved in. A sticky note was attached to the page, bright yellow, written in blocky, rushed handwriting. You looked. They know you now. There was no signature, no clue who left it. I froze, scanning the room for signs of anyone being inside, but nothing was disturbed except the binder, and something new that made my skin crawl. The sliding glass door leading to the woods had smeared fingerprints across the inside pane, long, thin streaks like something had dragged damp hands downward while watching me sleep. I took pictures of everything: door, fingerprints, the note, and called Ernie. He didn't answer. When I texted him the photos, his reply came within 60 seconds. Pack, move today, I'll refund everything, don't stay tonight. Followed by a second message. If the door unlocked for you 3 nights in a row, it's already marked you. Marked, like prey, like property. I called him. He didn't pick up. I called again. Nothing. I slammed my phone on the table and paced the apartment, adrenaline drowning out reason until I finally told myself I had 2 choices. Leave now or stay until 2:17 a.m. came again. I chose the obvious one. I grabbed my boots, my work laptop, and started stuffing clothes into a duffel bag when something hit the front door, hard enough to rattle the frame. I froze. The peephole went dark. Someone or something was standing directly outside. My heart stalled. A voice spoke through the door, muffled but clear, and every drop of blood in my body turned to ice because the voice was mine. Hey, it said casually, exactly the way I sounded when leaving a voicemail. You up? Can you open the door? My knees buckled. The voice continued, perfect, calm, human. I just need to ask you something. It won't take long. I backed away, shaking my head hard enough to make myself dizzy. Then the voice changed slightly, subtly trying different tones, different inflections, like scrolling through presets, until finally it landed on a version of my voice that sounded eerily tired, desperate. Please, it whispered. I'm locked out. I need to come in. No footsteps, no breathing, just my voice perfectly replicated, waiting for me to obey. I grabbed my keys, slid out the back through the kitchen window, and sprinted across the parking lot without looking back. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. When I finally dared to turn around, my front door was standing fully open. Something was in the doorway, but it wasn't a shape. It wasn't a person. It was a ripple, like heat, like distortion, standing upright and watching me leave. That was the morning I learned the truth. The thing didn't want to get into my apartment. It wanted to get into me. When I sped away from the apartment complex that morning, gravel spraying behind my tires like sparks, I had no destination in mind beyond, far. But no matter how quickly I drove or how many turns I made, the feeling of being watched didn't fade. It clung to me, a cold pressure on the back of my neck that made me check the rearview mirror every 5 seconds, expecting to see that ripple of distortion in the backseat. But the mirror stayed empty except for my own reflection. which, even then, looked wrong to me in ways I couldn't articulate, like the expression wasn't fully mine, like I was lagging behind myself by half a second, and the more I stared, the more nauseous I became. So I finally flipped the mirror upward and kept driving without looking at it again until I pulled into a grocery store parking lot 20 miles away and forced myself to breathe, to think, to plan. I called Ernie again, straight to voicemail. I texted him a single message: "Please answer. What is happening to me?" No reply. The binder rules, the sticky note, the emergency alert, the voice at the door. It all churned in my head like gears grinding bone. I sat in the front seat for nearly an hour before finally working up the courage to check the photos again, the ones I'd taken that morning. The fingerprint smear on the sliding door looked even worse now that I had distance. It wasn't a normal handprint. The fingers were too long, too tapered, the spacing subtly inhuman, and the smear trailed downward in a pattern that suggested the fingers hadn't dragged, they'd melted. But the biggest shock wasn't the smear. It was the photo of the bedroom door. In person, the door had been shut tight, bolt engaged. In the photo, the door was open. Not the 3-inch gap from the night before. No, in the image, the door stood wide open, revealing the hallway beyond it, and on the edge of the frame, barely visible unless you zoomed, was a distortion, a warping of light in the shape of a human outline leaning halfway into the room. My blood iced. That meant whatever had been there not only entered my room, it stood beside my bed while I slept, and my camera captured it. Except I didn't own a camera. That's when I noticed something else: metadata. Every photo showed a timestamp of 2:17 a.m., even the ones I'd taken this morning. Somehow my phone recorded everything at the exact minute the door unlocked each night. I wanted to throw the phone out the window. Instead, I turned it off and shoved it into my glove compartment like I could trap whatever was tainting it. My next thought was obvious. I needed to get my stuff out of that apartment, leave the state, disappear. But the idea of going back there alone made my stomach churn. So I drove to the only person I knew in this side of the state, my coworker Ethan, who lived 40 minutes north. I didn't tell him what happened on the phone. I just asked if I could crash for a night. He agreed, half asleep, confused but willing. When I arrived, he opened the door in sweatpants, rubbing his eyes, and said I looked like I'd just crawled out of a grave. "Bad night," I muttered, stepping inside. His apartment was safe. Normal, bright, cluttered, warm. Not a single locked door inside. No strange rules. No sense of being watched. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of relief, until I heard Ethan's front door click behind me, even though he hadn't touched it. He glanced back, frowning. Weird, the latch sticks sometimes. But I knew that sound. It was identical to my bedroom deadbolt sliding open on its own at 2:17 a.m. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I needed time to think before I sounded insane. We talked for a while, forced small talk really. He watched TV while I stared blankly at my knees, replaying the last 48 hours in my head. Around midnight, Ethan went to bed, and I lay awake on his couch, fully dressed, eyes open in the dark, counting the seconds until 2:17 like a man waiting for a verdict. The apartment was dead silent. 1:58 a.m. My heart started beating faster. 2:06. My hands were shaking. 2:12. I sat upright, hoodie sticking to my back with sweat. 2:16. The room felt too small, too warm, too quiet. And then 2:17 a.m. The sound came from Ethan's hallway. A click, soft but distinct, like a single lock disengaging slowly. I covered my mouth to stop a gasp. Ethan's bedroom door had just unlocked itself. A moment of absolute suffocating stillness followed. Then the knob twisted once, twice, testing itself, learning. The door eased open about an inch, just enough to make a thin line of darkness visible. I strained to see movement. There was none, but I heard it: footsteps. Soft, precise. Like someone tracing the path between Ethan's bed and the living room, pacing back and forth. I stood slowly, silently, every instinct screaming at me to run. But if I ran, I'd make noise, and noise was attention, and attention was death. So I pressed myself against the wall, sliding toward the kitchen, breath thin and sharp. The footsteps stopped. The darkness inside the bedroom doorway warped, like air being pulled through something invisible, and then, God help me, I heard Ethan's voice whisper, half asleep, confused, "Hello, is someone there?" Before I could move, before I could warn him, before anything could happen, something else responded from the other side of the door. A perfect imitation of Ethan's voice said softly, "Yeah, it's just me." My knees nearly gave out. No door should hold a thing that can speak in a man's voice while the real man is still in the room. Ethan mumbled again, oblivious, drifting on the edge of sleep. "You need something." "Yes," his mimic answered. "Let me in." That's when I broke. I lunged forward, grabbed the nearest heavy object, a cast iron pan, and sprinted down the hall shouting his name. The moment I yelled, the distortion at the doorway snapped inward like a rubber band. The air folded, bending light, and the door slammed shut with such force the frame splintered. Ethan jolted awake, bolting upright as I crashed into his room, pan raised like an idiot. "Dude, what the hell?" he yelled. But all I could do was stare at the door, at the perfect silence on the other side, at the space where something had been standing just seconds earlier. I whispered, shaking uncontrollably, "Ethan, you need to get dressed. Now, we're leaving." He didn't argue. Something in my face must have told him enough. 10 minutes later, we were in my car, the apartment behind us dark and still. Ethan kept asking what happened. I told him we'd talk somewhere safe. Except the more distance I put between us and that door, the more a horrifying realization formed in my mind. The thing wasn't tied to the apartment. It had followed me. It had found me again at 2:17. And next time it wouldn't test doors, it would open them. Ethan didn't say a word during the first 20 minutes of the drive, and I didn't blame him. If our positions were reversed, I wouldn't have believed a thing I'd said either, but he'd heard it. He'd heard his own voice speaking from the darkness when he was still lying in bed, and that alone was enough to strip disbelief straight out of a man's soul. Though neither of us dared talk about it, yet as we sped down the empty highway while streetlights flickered overhead like dying stars, each one blinking in a pattern that made my stomach twist because it was too regular, too deliberate, almost like a signal. And when I checked the dashboard clock and saw it was only 3:04 a.m., the sudden realization hit me with the force of an oncoming train. The thing didn't only move at 2:17 a.m. That was just when it unlocked doors, not when it stopped following, not when it stopped hunting. And if it had really followed me across town to Ethan's place, then there was nowhere I could go where doors and walls would mean anything. I pulled off the highway into the parking lot of an all-night gas station and sat with the engine running, palms slick, heart pounding so hard it made the steering wheel vibrate under my fingers. Ethan finally broke the silence. "Okay," he said shakily. "Tell me everything, right now." So I told him, from the first night door cracked open to the emergency alert to the smear on my sliding door to the voice outside pretending to be me to the thing unlocking his bedroom door just an hour ago. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he ran a hand across his face. "Dude, we need to go to the police." "And say what?" I snapped, too afraid to soften my voice. "That some invisible thing is copying our voices and unlocking doors. They'll lock me up before they help." He exhaled hard. "Okay, then what do we do? Drive forever, hide in stores, sleep in shifts?" I shook my head. "It's not about where we go, it's about time." Ethan blinked. "Time, 2:17 a.m., I whispered. "It always starts there. That's when it marks the door. That's when it chooses someone. But tonight," I swallowed. "It chose you too." Ethan's face drained of color. He looked like he wanted to deny it, argue, reject the idea entirely, but he couldn't, not when he'd heard his own voice whispering through the darkness. The gas station lights flickered, buzzing faintly. Ethan stiffened. Did the lights just—" "Yes," I said. "Time to move." Without another word, he scrambled into the passenger seat and I peeled out of the lot, heading nowhere and everywhere at once, driving like distance was a shield. For a while the world stayed normal. Trucks passed us. A billboard glowed with a cheap attorney ad. The radio crackled softly. But at 3:27 a.m., static swallowed the radio mid-song. Not the usual fuzzy white noise. This was wet, gurgling, pulsing static, and layered beneath it was a faint, rhythmic clicking like something tapping against the inside of the speaker. Ethan reached to turn it off. "Don't," I snapped. He froze. "If it's trying to transmit something," I said, "I want to know what." The static deepened, stretched, twisted, and then a voice emerged through the distortion like a drowning man breaking the surface. My voice, except it wasn't fully formed. Glitches dragged the syllables out of rhythm as if the thing learning to copy me was still practicing. You left too soon, it said, halting like a marionette forced through speech. I was done watching. Ethan slapped a hand over his mouth, eyes wide. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles went numb as the voice continued. You shouldn't have run, Marcus. I'm trying to understand you. Then the radio clicked again and a second voice joined in. Ethan S. Can't sleep, the mimic said cheerfully. Thought I'd stop by. Ethan let out a noise somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Turn it off, he whispered. Turn it off, Marcus. But I couldn't, because something in the tone had changed. The playful mimicry drained away, replaced by something flat, curious, clinical. 2 of you now, it said. 2 patterns, 2 doors, 2 times. Ethan's hand hovered near the radio dial, but I grabbed his wrist. Wait. The mimic's version of my voice spoke again, softer. Doors don't matter, locks don't matter, sleep doesn't matter. You are marked by looking and by being looked at. Then everything cut out. The radio went dead, the dashboard lights flickered. For a full 5 seconds, the entire car shut down while we were still moving. The engine sputtered back to life with a violent jolt, tires screeching. Ethan was shaking uncontrollably. It's learning, he whispered. It's getting better, understanding more. Yes, I said quietly. And that means we're almost out of time. We found a 24-hour diner and sat in a booth under painfully bright fluorescence that felt like safety only because the darkness outside was worse. The waitress didn't speak to us. She barely looked at us, and I couldn't tell if that was normal or if the fear on our faces made us seem diseased. Ethan wrapped both hands around his coffee cup like it was a lifeline. Marcus, he said slowly, this thing, it didn't just follow you. He stopped mid-sentence, eyes going glassy as he stared past my shoulder. Marcus, don't turn around, my blood iced. Is it outside? Ethan swallowed, his throat bobbed. No, he whispered, it's inside. My heart slammed against my ribs. Where? Ethan's breathing quickened. Booth across from us, he whispered. It's sitting there, same shape as a person, but it's Marcus, it's glitching, like it's made of heat waves or pixels or something, and its head is tilted like it's studying us. I kept my eyes locked on the table. Is it facing us? Yes. Is it wearing a face? A beat of silence. Then barely audible, Marcus, it's wearing yours. My breath froze mid-lung. Does it see that you see it? Ethan let out a tiny panicked exhale. I think it wants me to. The lights in the diner flickered once, twice. And then Ethan said the words that shattered whatever courage I had left. Marcus, it's smiling. My hands clenched into fists under the table. I spoke through my teeth. Okay. We're leaving, slowly. No sudden movements. Ethan grabbed his coat with shaking fingers. I slid out of the booth, forcing my legs to move even though my entire body screamed to sprint. As we reached the door, a sound rose behind us, a soft clicking sound like tongues learning to form consonants. Then in my voice, too close behind us, it whispered one single word, stay. I didn't look back. Neither did Ethan. The bell above the diner door jingled as we pushed through it, and that tiny sound was somehow the loudest, most terrifying thing I'd ever heard. In the parking lot under flickering lights, I finally told Ethan the truth I'd been afraid to admit even to myself. We can't run from it. He stared at me, trembling. Then what the hell do we do? I looked into the darkness beyond the lights, knowing the thing was watching from somewhere we couldn't see. We stop surviving, I said, and start fighting. I didn't know what fighting meant yet, but I knew running was pointless because the thing wasn't chasing us across distance. It was following patterns, imitating familiarity, anchoring itself to us like a parasite learning its host. And if it had learned our voices, our movements, the timing of our sleep, then the next step would be learning something deeper, something essential. So the only hope we had was to understand it before it understood us completely, which meant going back to the beginning. Back to the apartment where it first unlocked my door, the place where the rulebook binder had warned me too late. And as insane as it sounded, Ethan agreed because fear had boiled him into a brittle version of himself, pale and trembling, yet determined to follow the only man who might have a plan. So we drove back in silence through the darkness until the familiar silhouette of my building loomed like a gravestone under a dead sky. All balcony lights out, every window darkened. as if the entire complex were holding its breath. And when I parked, neither of us moved for nearly a full minute because stepping out of the car felt like willingly stepping into a cage. But finally, I opened the door and the cold air hit my face with the metallic bite of hospital corridors. Nothing moved, no wind, no insects, no distant road noise, the whole neighborhood smothered in unnatural quiet. And yet the shadows near the stairwell seemed to pulse subtly like something breathing against the edges of the world. And that was when Ethan whispered, "Marcus, are you hearing that?" And at first I heard nothing, but then beneath the silence came a faint tapping, rhythmic, deliberate, 2 taps, a pause, 2 taps again. And it took me a horrifyingly long moment to realize it matched the pattern of a heartbeat, except it wasn't ours, it was coming from the building itself, like the walls had grown a pulse. And I said, "Don't react, don't run, don't give it anything new to imitate." And we moved toward my unit with controlled steps, half expecting the hallway door to swing open by itself, but it didn't. Instead, the moment I slid my key into my apartment lock, the light above us flickered violently and the tapping stopped, replaced by a sound far worse. The soft, wet whispering inhale of something drawing breath just beyond the door, like it had been waiting with its mouth against the wood, listening, practicing the timing of my lungs so it could echo them perfectly. And I almost turned back then, almost dragged Ethan back to the car and fled the city entirely. But the thought of being hunted forever, of hearing my own voice stalking me every night at 2:17, hardened something inside me, so I unlocked the door and pushed it open. And the apartment was utterly, impossibly empty, every shadow perfectly still, no fingerprints on the glass, no binder on the table, no sign I had ever lived there, like it had been wiped clean, reset to 0, which meant the thing had already moved beyond the physical space and into something else, something tied directly to us. Ethan stepped inside behind me and whispered, "Why is it so clean?" And I didn't answer because my attention snapped to the bedroom door, the same door that had opened 3 nights in a row, now standing perfectly centered and perfectly closed. And as we stared, the digital clock on my microwave flickered to 2:16 a.m., which made no sense because it was barely past 11 when we arrived. And I said, "Ethan, that clock is wrong." But as I stepped closer, I realized the numbers weren't numbers at all. They were symbols, glitching shapes, mimicking the appearance of a digital readout but not understanding how time actually worked. And that meant the thing wasn't bound to 2:17, it was learning what 2:17 meant to us, trying to recreate its trigger, and the room temperature dropped sharply enough that our breath fogged. Then the bedroom lock clicked. Once, twice, slowly. The knob twisted. The door eased open exactly 3 inches. The gap glowing faintly with a soft white distortion like the light inside was bending sideways rather than shining outward. And Ethan grabbed my arm with panic in his grip, but he didn't scream, didn't speak. And as the gap widened another inch, we heard something moving inside, first dragging like skin sliding across floorboards, then shifting, rearranging itself into a shape it thought we wanted to see, and then a voice. Not mine, not Ethan's, not fully formed. Whispered from just beyond the crack, "You came back, I knew you would." Ethan froze. The voice whispered again, closer, "We've been practicing." We, not I. My stomach turned. There was more than one. Maybe there always had been. Maybe the first was simply the only one that had revealed itself. The air shimmered inside the doorway, and something began to emerge, tall, stretched, vaguely human but with proportions subtly wrong. Shoulders too narrow, arms too long, head tilted like it didn't understand the concept of balance yet. And the closer it got, the more its surface rippled like a reflection on disturbed water. And I realized with horror it was trying to decide which face to wear, mine or Ethan's. And the glitching alternated between the two, flickering like a broken slideshow, until it settled on neither and instead leaned forward with a smooth, featureless void where a face should be. And I reacted before I could think. I grabbed Ethan and yanked him backward toward the sliding door, throwing my body weight into the handle until it shattered and we tumbled out onto the balcony as the thing lunged, stretching unnaturally, its arms bending in ways that defied anatomy as it lunged for the threshold like a starving animal denied a meal. But it didn't step past it. It didn't cross the doorframe. It stopped right at the edge, pressing its featureless face against the invisible barrier, unable to pass. Unable to follow because for all its mimicry it still obeyed some kind of rule, some unseen law tied to configuration or consent or invitation, and that realization hit me like a revelation. It needed us to open the door. It could unlock, unbolt, unseal, but it could not enter without our participation, without us breaking the boundary. That was the only reason we were still alive. Ethan and I didn't speak as we sprinted down the building stairs and into the freezing night, and we didn't look back even though we heard the thing whisper our names from the balcony above, switching between our voices like a deck of cards shuffled too fast. We drove until dawn. Then we drove farther and farther. But here's the part I haven't told anyone, not even Ethan. It's been 6 months since that night. 6 months of hotels, rentals, motels, couch surfing, never staying anywhere longer than a week, never sleeping without barricading every door with dressers and luggage. Ethan still travels with me, or at least I hope it's Ethan, because last week at 2:17 a.m. in a roadside motel in New Mexico, something unlocked the bathroom door while he slept. And when I whispered his name to wake him, he whispered back in a tone that wasn't tired or scared or confused, just too perfect, too measured, like a voice practiced over and over until it finally sounded right.